All right, we are live. I'm just going to drop the link into our Gitter chat so anyone else can check it out. Cool. And then let's go ahead and get started. So I will, oh, hey, there's Harold. Let me let him in. Hey, Harold, how you doing?
Hey, sorry for late.
Just perfect timing, right as I was about to get going.
Just as planned.
How have you been?
Good. Yeah, we have lots of OKR planning, so I was finishing things up last minute, so that's good. Yeah, we had good show last Friday with Brendan showing off Webhint and Firefox, so success.
Yeah, now we just need to get that theming sorted out.
Yes, I'm playing with Mike Ratliff. We're in this rewriting phase at DevTools for some parts for site isolation. So people are being pulled into different directions. I'm pulling him into one. So hopefully I get like an arm at least or something. So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, we've got, I mean, we should be pretty prepared and ready to go. And then I know there was still, last we talked, we wanted to still get together and maybe discuss some of the finer points with Victoria.
Yeah.
And I know Stephanie had been busy the past couple of weeks, and so we hadn't tried to set that up yet, but maybe that's something we can look at here maybe in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that'd be useful just to know like what's needed from Victoria, so we can schedule that in. And I think otherwise, okay, one update actually, we did feature it now in the DevTools collection. So in Firefox DevTools, share that.
Oh yes, please share.
So in Firefox DevTools, if you go onto a page, let me see. Now, so the way we expose it, there's a Get More Tools menu down here. See that? And then that gets you to the add-ons page. And up there, all the way up. Okay. Awesome. It is one of the most visited collections on add-ons page. I looked up the statistics, even the things that they have on their homepage. There's all like kind of recommendation. Like these are basically getting some users, and then we're getting nearly as many in our collection because we're driving users from our own front end there. Yeah, that's what we're.
That is absolutely awesome.
Cool.
Sweet, yeah, and actually, I think that's a good segue into what's been going on just this past week. We've released the world, as I kind of term it, so we've updated the extensions, the browser extensions, the CLI, node packages, the online scanner, and our extension for VS Code. So I think this is the first time we've updated everything all at once. Usually they've been a little bit staggered. And so that all happened in the last 2 days. I think we're still waiting because it takes almost a week. It's been for the Chrome extension store to finish reviewing, given we have to ask for permission to all URLs. And so they kind of put us through a little bit more of an extensive process there. But we are, the updated browser extension is already live in the Mozilla or the Firefox add-on store, and then also in the Chromium Edge extension store as well.
Sweet, awesome. Yeah, one thing that came up that the curation team asked me, it's still marked experimental. And I think, yeah, that's maybe something to discuss today. Like, can we make it non-experimental?
Yes, actually, it was funny. I was talking to Anton a little bit last week as he's getting ready to come back next week, and yeah, we're getting eager to kind of flip it to an official V1. And I think Rachel and I have been discussing this a little bit too. There really shouldn't be anything blocking at this point. So this release included One of the last pieces, which we didn't have as good of a responsive design at some of the smaller sizes as we wanted, and we got some external contributions to actually help clean that up a little bit. And then the last piece that I think would go out as a requirement for us market non-experimental is we're aligning how we ask for telemetry across the browser extension and the VS Code extension. And so with the update that just went out to the VS Code extension, we now are doing an explicit opt-in, and we want to do the same for the browser extension. And David's actually working on that right now. So we've got a PR in progress. It'll be kind of just a little toast in the corner with a link out to the documentation page we already have that describes what general telemetry we collect, which is mostly, we're trying to figure out how many scans are being run, and then like what hints are being triggered and what's the status of those hints, but we don't track, what pages they're being run against or individual user sessions. It's just those particular aggregates.
Yeah, for the extension using the application insights.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's plugged into the application insights, and then we're hoping that'll give us a little bit of supplemental information on top of what we already get from the extension stores, where the extension stores are going to be the only place we really get a good feel on the total number of downloads, since we're not tracking anything per user, but we can get a sense of activity. And I think for us, one of the most important pieces is figuring out what hints are useful, and that's really what we're gearing this telemetry for, is what are people actually encountering in their content, and then what are they acting upon. And so tracking the aggregate hint status should help lead us to that. Now, I do expect that we may end up wanting to look at zeroing in on certain areas as we get more data, specifically because some of our hints are very broad, like the Compat API hints that are plugged into the MDN data. That's one hint in the overall metrics. But we may be more interested in like, okay, well, which CSS properties are flagging or getting reported most commonly, because that could be another indication of things that we should be adding to the default ignore list if they're commonly used for progressive enhancement, regardless of what browser you might be targeting.
Yeah.
And that's a level of depth we don't have yet in the telemetry, but it would still be all anonymous and aggregate. So we have all those out. Other small things with this release included a little bit additional detail on the accessibility data. We had a customer request for providing, well, specifically it was around the color contrast rule from Axe, and providing the actual calculated color contrast, which Axe does have. And so what we updated to do was look to see if there was additional details given to us from Axe Core, and then exposing that message as part of the message that we included. So specifically with the color contrast rule now, actually, yeah, I don't think I know of a site offhand, or I'd quickly demo it. But it shows you the calculated color contrast ratio, and then what the actual foreground color and background color hex codes were. And that's all coming from Axe Core, just additional information that we're now surfacing when it's available. And then let me go ahead, and I'm going to switch over to sharing part of my screen now so that we can see what else we were doing. Harold, was there anything else before I kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the last sprint you wanted to discuss in terms of other feedback that's come up, or just coordination?
I think those are the things that make it nice, experimental, so we can point more people at it. I was backed up with other blog posts. I'm kind of like on 69 release posts as well. So I hope to get something out within this quarter, at least, like to point people at WebHint. So that's at least my to do for my OKRs. We have another VS Code extension coming for Firefox debugging, so maybe I throw them together, all the Microsoft projects. So, but yeah, nothing else for me. So.
Okay. Well, yeah, and so sounds like the biggest thing we can do to help is, at the moment, is to get to an official V1 and remove the experimental labeling then.
Yeah, and I think the gaps in theming are fine. People are used to that. Like, it doesn't look outlandish in the tools. Looks pretty well integrated as it is. So.
Okay. The only other question I know from like the Firefox extent, like running the extension in Firefox perspective, was the CSP issue, which I know you were trying to have Mike look into.
I'll ping Mike again. Otherwise, I start looking into it myself.
Because yeah, I could imagine that might be one more that if we could get something a little bit better in from the user experience perspective, that'd be nice to have to mark it non-experimental, because I know that can hit across quite a few sites.
Yeah, especially if you test against production sites where you want to test it. Then,
yeah.
So yeah.
Just to clarify, is the only thing that we're sort of blocked on in terms of marking it non-experimental is getting the telemetry change in?
Yeah.
Okay,
although the CSP change might be another good one for Firefox in particular, to refresh everyone's memory. So if there is a content security policy that's preventing dynamic scripts being added into the page, then we're just going to not work, but we're going to not work in a way that we extend the whole timeout and just give a timeout message after 3 minutes. Now, we can't work around and actually get Webhint to work on these pages, but we should be able to set up something where we can detect that we weren't able to run our content script, or the part of our content script that we actually need to, like, this is going to be like what we're using to run Axe Core in the page is where we're actually dynamically injecting the script. And so if we should be able to basically have kind of a started event added to our spin up process. And if we don't get that within a second or two, then we can say, okay, well, we weren't able to spin up and run. So we can let someone know that we can't analyze this page much sooner than them sitting there waiting for 3 minutes and having it just feel like a broken experience.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's bad.
So I think that one's pretty important too. And so, yeah, that if our goal is to get the experimental label removed, then I think we'll want to, if we're not going to have time or additional resources to help with that one, Harold, then I think we can kind of just prioritize that and get it done.
Okay, yeah, I hope we can pick it on our side, as it's kind of long-standing issue of Firefox. So I'll.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be great if we could actually make it work in the future. That'll be fantastic.
Yes, I'll repaying the security, so there. See how it looks for Q4.
Cool. All right, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and share the ZenHub board now. So a lot of what we've been starting to look into this kind of past extended sprint, I'm kind of speaking toward the past 2 sprints here, we are starting to revamp our own documentation on our website and start preparing to promote a lot of these different extension things when you come to Webhint IO, and not only for the extensions, but for using Webhint as part of your CI flow. So there's been, David was doing some additional research this sprint and had started in the previous sprint, which we're sitting in the in progress category here, for going and taking the latest version of Webhint, looking at different ways that we can run it in different CI systems, and starting to kind of document what the most streamlined process looks like for helping someone get up and use those. And David, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what you found there? I think I can open one of these up. I think you put some notes in here so far.
Yeah, yesterday I added the notes there. The last comment, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so basically I was trying to run Webhint in those 2 systems, Travis and Circle CI. I think it's really easy for the user to use it. So you just need to have your command in your package JSON if you are in a Node project, and be sure to install hint as a dev dependency. And then that's all. You just need to run the command inside Travis, and that will work. And if there is any error, the build will fail.
And this is, just to clarify, this is for the static analysis case where we're looking at the raw source files, right?
Yeah, this one in this case is for the file system. So this is going to check your project, the raw files.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go down, I mean, there is also an example if your project is not a Node.js project. And go down, and this one.
That was, okay, that's in here.
Yeah, so for example, in this case, if your project is a Python project, you need to install Node, and then just run hint again your file system.
Okay.
That's all. So it's not complicated.
And then the second case was, I mean, very similar, but the online case, right? So by online, we mean pointing to a web server.
Yeah. So in this case, is the most complicated part in this case is deploy your project before. But that's something that is going to depend if it's in Azure. We have an example for Azure. So it's going to depend if it's in Azure, in Amazon, whatever.
Yeah, but I think our hope is we can maybe find a couple other examples so we can reference a few different systems, right? We don't want to have to maintain a bunch of documentation about how to deploy to different server environments, where I'm expecting that we should be able to find some good references there.
Yeah. So yeah, but then it's also the only thing you need to do is change the path of your project for the URL, and it will work too.
And I think I recall when we looked at Circle.
Yeah, in this case, this is incomplete because I need to add a step that is deploy your.
Oh, just to list the deploy. But then I guess the other important piece was, since we want to run with Puppeteer by default at the moment, that means we need to.
Yeah, we need to install Chrome.
Yeah, we need to make sure we get Chrome from somewhere.
Yeah. So with that add-on, you get Chrome installed. So.
And I know, let's see, like with the Circle CI one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because Circle CI works with Docker images.
Yeah.
So the thing what you need is have Chrome and Node installed in your image.
Okay.
And Circle CI has their own.
Yeah, their own images.
Yeah, if you go to the last comment. Yeah, here.
Okay, so yeah, it was this part.
Yeah, it was that part. So all the pre-built images for Circle CI, if you add dash browser or dash Node dash browser, you are going to get those things installed, even if the image is other language. So yeah.
If I recall correctly, right, in Circle it includes both Chrome and Firefox. I know we can't use Firefox yet, but with the work that's going on to get Firefox to work with Puppeteer, that would open it up as a potential target in here as well in the future.
Yeah, the browsers install Chrome and Firefox, at least. I think they install something else, but
okay,
at least those two. Yeah, so see, there is an step that is, okay, add the necessary steps to deploy your website first.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then run the test. Yeah, because the idea is test your pre-production or your staging website, because if you are trying production, it's like, no.
Mm-hmm. And then there's just a note at the bottom if you wanted to opt into allowing us to get telemetry from those runs, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Neat. Yeah, thanks for doing that research and putting that together. It'll be great to kind of get that turned into official documentation. And Rachel, does that kind of sound like along the lines of what you were thinking of when we first started talking about this?
Yeah, I think that's great. I had just left one comment in the Travis CI one about, and I guess it applies to Circle as well, like whether we want to document reporting, like how to enable the publishing of reporting or gating or anything like that as part of the CI CD documentation.
Okay, let's see. So that you said it was in the Travis one? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, I think by default we are using summary, right? I think
the summary report. Well, and so well, it's a fair question. So right now at the basic level, we're going to fail the CI, right, David, with that setup, because we're with the non-success error code.
Yeah, because they are set as error, so the build is going to fail.
But with summary being the default, then that is a very good point, because summary doesn't give you these individual errors. It only gives you a summary by category of where errors were, so you wouldn't know explicitly what to go fix without more details. So that is something we probably want to make sure we're guiding them toward a path here where our default guidance is giving them the list of errors somewhere.
Yeah, because I think also the HTML is the default, but you can.
Oh, is that also getting generated? But then that'll be on the CI server.
Yeah, but it's going to be in the CI server, so I don't know if you can read that.
Yeah, I would imagine we need it to show up in the logs on the console for this to be useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, or do we have the option to even publish it back to, like, if they're deploying from GitHub or something, having the option to deploy it back to the source?
I don't know. David?
I don't know.
Okay.
But we can tell the users how to configure another formatter, or we can change our default.
Yeah,
instead of summary.
It does make me wonder if maybe the default. I think we already. Do we have internal detection already that we're running in CI? I think we do.
Yeah, I think we have a package for that.
And so I could see where maybe for the CLI, like defaulting to summary with the HTML generation on your local machine is a fine approach, but maybe when we're running in CI, we want to use one of the different other
stylish, probably,
so that we're actually putting it out in the logs.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing too is also just giving awareness to the user of like, hey, when you run this, like, imagining that I'm someone who's never used this product before, maybe I have the expectation that my build is not going to fail because of this kind of error. Like, just being aware of like what the behavior is going to be and how I can go and customize it. Like, if I never want the build to fail, I just want to generate a report. I can see that being like a reasonable use case. Just giving the documentation of like, here's how you make something fail the build. Here's how you make something not fail the build, but like report out to the console or generate an HTML file or an XML file. And I think this is also, potentially important if we're also looking at like eventually hooking into like Azure pipelines, having like also different options for report generation like XML. So that can like feed into other systems and things like that. So I know I'm kind of thinking ahead, but I guess the first step would be sort of just documenting like what is the default behavior and how can I, as a user, go and change it.
Yeah.
Yep. So I started typing these as you were going, and I think I missed at least one of your last points.
Calling out how to configure webhint, I guess more specifically, like how you define what things fail the build and what things get reported out.
That was the important one, yes.
Yeah, that's, I forgot to add but the last point is about that, is about how to configure hint. But yeah, we should say to the user like, okay, if you don't want to fail, just configure your hints to warning. and that is okay. Or if you want to fail on something, just set to error.
Yep.
And then I guess another thing would be like, if we're generating reports, like where do those end up and what format are they in, HTML versus like XML or something else?
Mm-hmm.
As a default.
I don't know what y'all think, but I feel like having reports generated and published somewhere, it might be a feature that would be requested or asked for.
Okay, I put that in there as a question for now.
That's something that I think we don't have right now, right? So we have the HTML formatter, but it's created in the same inside the CI. So
well,
I don't know if.
Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I don't know if we can access those files, but maybe we can create another formatter for this purpose that can publish somewhere else.
Yeah, what I was going to say is all I know with the HTML formatter, I mean, it used to have just a hard-coded place it saved, but I think we made that configurable near the beginning of the summer so that you can at least specify the path of where it saves, but that's different than publishing the results somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the way that I imagine that working is almost like, you know, you export the report locally, and then you do like a git push blah, and you have like your git credentials configured at some point so that like you just make that part of your CI process. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm taking a look and we are creating the HTML. So we have that formatter is enabled. So the thing is we need to move that content to another place.
Yeah, and it sounds like if we don't have that, like
today,
I mean, that it's almost like a separate thing, right? It's not so much about the documentation. It's maybe it is like, hey, we export these files locally. If you as a user want to configure your pipeline so that you can then like push those reports somewhere, you just like, maybe we leave it as an exercise to the reader, right? Like git push blah, and then you can have your reports back if you want to like commit your reports back up to wherever your source lives.
Okay. Cool. I'm going to publish this before I forget, because I've done that plenty of times where I type up stuff and then I move on to another window and forget to actually submit it. Okay, Harold had to jump off to go do some other work, so let's keep moving on here. So Utsav, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about where we are with the serverless online service? I know we were able to, you had some other stuff disrupting you throughout these sprints, but I think we're still making good progress there, right?
Yeah, I think yesterday we've got everything up and running on staging.
Is there a good issue for me to pull open while we talk about this?
I just closed all of them that were relevant.
So I guess, yeah, done, but this is what we did recently, right?
Yeah. So now we were talking yesterday about doing some integration tests and how we want to do that. Probably use Puppeteer or something like that and fire up like a generic like HTML page that we know gives consistent results or something like that, and see if our entire parts of the systems, from the website to the online functions to the workers, are performing properly, and then have it, if it's green, then have it auto deploy to production. So I think that's like the last step remaining, and then we can swap those out to production. Well, before that, we need to merge the two repos. We have like serverless and the existing one right now, so we'll do that and then the rest. But it's almost done, I suppose.
Yeah. Now I know when we were chatting last, you mentioned that most of this would be able to be auto deployed, right, and or at least to staging, and then right as you were mentioning, wanting to have some sort of integration test, maybe driving our actual scanner web page or some sort of a mock around it via Puppeteer to validate that before we'd swap into production, which we've talked about having before for the existing website or service, depending on which piece we're testing at the moment. Now, for the workers piece, because as I understand it at the moment, the workers are still going to have to be on VMs and running. And so kind of with the existing setup where we have Docker images that we're periodically updating. Are you also including those kind of in your plans around automating deployment to staging, or would that kind of remain the more manual process that we have today?
David can probably chime on that.
I think we can automate things, but
because I love the idea of finishing this off with being able to get everything at least to a staging server automatically deployed from master, so that whenever we merge stuff in, we can quickly turn around and test it. I know that with like the online scanner, anytime we're updating our NPM packages, then technically the workers need to update, because they have to update to get the latest versions of our packages and run the recent updates that we put into Hint.
Yeah, but we need to investigate, because this needs Docker to generate the images and everything, and I don't know if Azure Pipeline is going to support that or.
Yeah, the other question I have there is, have we yet had a chance to at least test whether we can use Chrome on a Linux version of an Azure function?
There's a task for it, I think, but I haven't looked into it much.
Because that feels like the other piece to kind of answer before going too far down automating the existing one. Certainly from some of the searches that I've done online, it looks like there have been people that have tried and had trouble. But that stuff gets out of date so quick, it's hard to say what the current state of the world is until we give it a shot.
Yeah, the other thing is that the worker will need Hint to be installed. So I don't know if that is also a problem or not.
Pulling NPM packages is definitely pretty standard. And the issue is just more with having a Chrome instance because of the OS dependencies that it has. I believe the last piece I found was talking more about just certain libs that aren't installed on I think it's a flavor of Ubuntu. I don't recall for sure that the Azure Functions Linux is using, but like there's some of the like libgtk packages and stuff that aren't there, that even for running headless are needed. I don't know if we'd have an option to run a command to add those, or if that's just locked out.
Yeah, you should be able to actually deploy from a Docker. Like if you wanted to like make a Docker file and then include like the installation of those libs as part of the, like build it from like an Ubuntu base or something, and then like in your Docker file actually like bring in those libs. You should be able to like deploy an Azure function from a predefined container.
Well, that sounds like a nice in between from where we are today.
Yeah, it's more or less what we have right now, because the Docker image for the worker install Chrome and Node and all the dependencies we need.
So basically, this is all sounding to me like really good stuff to look at next sprint to get a conclusive answer on before we try to. I mean, I guess it doesn't prevent us from deploying the other work if you think that we're at a, Utsav and David, if you guys think that we're at a point where we're ready to take the other serverless pieces and start moving them into production. If you want to finish that piece up first, then by all means. But I think that before I invest too much in trying to automate the existing worker deployment, I think we should answer the question about whether we can use like a Docker image with Azure Functions.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Awesome.
Good.
All right. I'm going to just quickly scan down here. So there were a number of smaller bug fixes across, I think, the online scanner and the browser extension that came up in the past couple of weeks that we kind of split up and tackled to fix some different things. I'm not going to go into depth on those right now. One of the other big updates was for the VS Code extension. So I'm spend a little bit of time talking to this guy because I spent quite a bit of time here. So originally this was just about the fact that we had a very noisy prompt to install WebHint. If you only ever installed it to a project, then every additional project you'd open up, you'd get a prompt to install WebHint again, which can get really irritating. And so we wanted to fix that, but we didn't want to leave it as a gap where we don't prompt, but WebHint's not running. You've installed this extension and now nothing works. And so we took this as an opportunity to do a larger refactor of the VS Code extension. And so now we do this piece where we don't prompt if the hint RC is missing with the release that just went out yesterday. But we also have a shared WebHint instance that's part of the extension that we'll fall back to. So for any project that you open up that doesn't already have WebHint, we'll use this shared instance that's part of the extension that we keep up to date as part of the extension, so that you actually get analysis out of the box. And then if you start wanting to tailor and configure WebHint for a given project in VS Code, but you add a hint RC file to the project, that's when we'll prompt to install hint to the project so that you can keep a version kind of in lockstep and you can control when the updates happen as part of your project. Although you can still choose to cancel that and we'll fall back to using the shared instance as well. And then the other piece that kind of went out with this update that had happened in a prior sprint was the telemetry for the hint status that we're calculating on save, and throttled a bit so that we can see, you know, what's triggering, what hints are triggering kind of in the source code scenarios versus what we see in the browser extension, because we're actually running slightly different hints in the two contexts too. Because when we're running in VS Code, we can analyze things like Webpack configuration files, TypeScript configuration files, in addition to just looking at the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we'd end up running in the browser. One other new thing that went out in the update across all of our instances, and I don't know if I can find the right bug here in the list because it overflows on me. But we had an external contribution for a new hint around identifying if there's inline styles in an SVG block that are affecting elements outside of it. And I can't seem to actually dig it up at the moment, but yeah, doesn't look like I'm going to find it at the moment, but that went live as well. Oh, there it is, right as I was giving up. So yeah, specifically targeting style tags inside inline SVG and HTML, as Anton had kind of noticed this online as Sarah had tweeted about this, and Anton thought it would make a good hint. And so we had put that on the list, and Jaspreet had decided to pick it up and implement it, and now it's live in the system.
Nice.
Okay, Rachel, I don't know how much time you've had so far to look at kind of the main page. I know we've been wanting to think about reworking that to talk about all of our entry points. Do you want to?
Yeah. So I've actually kind of reimagined some of the content for the homepage, and also looking at some of the interior pages just to make sure that our sidebars and everything reflect the content that we have and that we want to promote. I don't have a PR because I realized that we actually would need to do design work before we could implement those changes. And of course, I'd also be welcome to like having folks, review that content and see if it, aligns with, just to kind of get consensus. So what I can do is publish the content like as a comment to that issue, but I think it does make sense to make a PR because like, I think we had talked about having new images on the homepage and things like that. And I think trying to like plop the content in to the existing layout it's not really going to make sense. So I think I need to, I think there are a couple of things that needs to happen. One, I'm happy to post the content and open it up for feedback. Secondly, I need to sync with Stephanie so we can actually get some new layouts so that, once we do have that content nailed down, then we can actually put it in a layout that makes sense.
Okay, so I probably should mark this in progress, right?
Yes, please do.
Cool. And yeah, I think posting the content to the issue here is, given what you described, is the perfect way to kind of move forward from this point, and then we can discuss with Stephanie on how to fit that into the design, and plus, then that gives everyone kind of an opportunity to give feedback.
Yeah, I think it would be nice, in particular, not just like kind of copy editing feedback and things like that, but really how we present the product to users and like the kind of like value that we are hoping the product is going to bring to them, and saying like, hey, this extension is good for this. The VS Code extension is good for this. The browser extension is good for this part of your development cycle. The CLI is important for this part of your development cycle. And we're kind of thinking of it as this like end-to-end, or I'm sort of proposing that we think of it as this end-to-end tool that helps you with every step of your development process. And so it would be great to kind of make sure we're all on the same page, especially if, if someone says, oh, that's not how I would use the browser extension at all. I would use it this phase, or I wouldn't use it that way at all. So that kind of feedback would be helpful in terms of like thinking about the user's user journey, or sort of like what the user can expect, what value they can expect to get from Webhint.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds excellent.
So yeah, I'll post that up either this afternoon. I'm in meetings almost all morning, but either this afternoon or on Tuesday.
Okay, sounds good. Yes, Monday's Labor Day in the US. Got to keep reminding myself of that so I don't show up. Let's see, and then kind of along the lines, I assume this kind of folds into the same.
Yeah, and I think I even have it blocked, like that comment there, it says that it's blocked.
Yep. Cool. Let's see, I know as we talked with Harold earlier, we haven't been able to get anyone yet helping on the kind of the design integration to get things a little more native feeling in Firefox, so we didn't make progress on that this sprint. And given I ran into kind of a series of issues trying to get the releases of all the packages out this week, I ended up postponing adding on to that pain by not trying to roll in too many additional changes. So I haven't published the browser extension packages yet, but I'm going to look at that today so that we can have those up on NPM and get the docs pulled into the website. Now that I guess another thing that we didn't mention, because I think we talked about it last sprint, but now that all of the docs in the website are being pulled from the NPM packages to keep them in sync with what's published, as opposed to a little bit ahead of the curve as they were before, because they were pulling from our repo, our Git repo. And so the same thing kind of applies to the VS Code extension. And then there's another task that I don't think I had moved into this sprint, but it relates to getting the browser extension published. And that's just moving those markdown files that you had put together, Rachel. I'm just going to move them over to, or move it over to the README file for the browser extension. And I'll move the images over. I already did the necessary update in this. I've already merged the necessary update. It didn't go out in the release yet to properly reference the directory of each of our sub-projects on NPM so that the images will resolve. That's an issue that's already currently affecting some of our packages. If you view the READMEs on the NPM website, you'll see a few broken images, and that's because we point to the mono repo that we have for everything, but we didn't have the packages reference which folder they lived under. And then, so yeah, the rest of this website stuff kind of, I think, moves forward, and we didn't get to bundling the VS Code extension, kind of a similar thing. There was enough churn already going on that I decided to leave this as a separate step for after the current release, but we're getting enough files in there that their tooling's recommending that we actually create a bundle for load performance. And this is something that will enable us to share more code with other parts of Webhint. There's not a lot we need to share because the VS Code extension actually, installs and runs Hint from NPM, so it doesn't have to bring a lot of it itself. But there are a couple shared utilities that we'd like to be able to use. And right now, with the packager that's used for VS Code, using that directly, it only knows how to pull entire modules, and so it brings in way too much stuff for us to reference our common utilities. And so we need to go through the Webpack process so we can just pluck out the couple things we need from our utilities package and not get the whole thing. Cool. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing this here. Just see. Okay, so I think that about wraps it up for the last of the sprint. I'm going to